Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. I tried to get through the whole chapter, but I just didn't seem like it was. Seems like you guys want to go to bed tonight. Sometime. That's a loaded question. I did have one announcement I wanted to make, as I think about it right now, that on this Sunday night we are going to watch that movie Unplanned. So it's a pretty powerful movie. So we're going to watch that on Sunday night. Maybe just do 3 songs Sunday night because the movie's out 40 minutes or something. If you have any young people, young girls, stuff would be good for them to see it. You know, invite them out to see it.
Does everybody know what the movie's about?
Unplanned is a movie about abortion. Planned Parenthood in the States, and this lady that was a part of it, and she realized what she was doing, and turned her life around. It's a powerful movie. Very eye-opening. But tonight, Hosea chapter 4. As we looked at in the first 3 chapters, you know, Hosea was the prophet who was called before Israel was going to be taken away. You know, God's been ministering to them, reaching out to them. They've been rebellious for a long time. They've had a lot of bad kings, like I think 19 bad kings or something, some outrageous number. A lot of bad kings. And the people have strayed. They've been worshiping idols. They've sacrificed their babies to idols. They've just done atrocious things, and God has been loving them and reaching out to them and trying to get their attention. And now He's had Hosea as this prophet to them, who's given them a living parable, living His life. In the first 3 chapters we looked at, that, you know, God had him marry a prostitute and support her when she was going out on him and living with other men. He still supported her while she was staying there, till she got so low that she ended up being sold on the slave block, and he bought her back as his wife, not as a slave. And God was just showing His heart, how his heart would break. How His heart would break because of the adultery, spiritual adultery, that people had been doing to him all these years. There, now you can hear me better, right? So He's still willing to take the people back, even though they've strayed so far, because He's such a loving God. Now, chapter 4, that we're going to get into tonight, He's just going to lay it out to them. He's going to tell them the truth. After He showed them His unconditional love, but at the same time, He has to be a just God, and He has to deal with the sin. So He's going to straight out tell them what it's all about. Starting in chapter 4. So in verse 1, He says, "Listen to the word of the Lord, O sons of Israel. For the Lord has a case against the inhabitants of the land, because there is no faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land." You know, they've gotten so far down that they don't even know who their God is anymore. Him who brought them out of slavery, Him who's taken care of them, and they've just turned their back on Him. And He has a case against them. He's going to tell them, I got a case, I got something against you. You have no knowledge of God. You have no knowledge of me. You know, when the knowledge of God gets lost, the people change. Kindness and love isn't quite there anymore. People don't get along like they used to. I mean, I've seen the changes in my country, the United States, since I was a kid until now, and I'm sure even before that, of removing God and the effects of that. It affects society. Now, in verse 2, it goes on to say what happens. You've left me, there's no knowledge of me in the land. It says, then there is swearing, deception, murder, stealing, adultery. They employ violence, so that bloodshed follows bloodshed. So this is what leaving God brings for you, these things. Opposite of what people want. I mean, look at those things. Swearing, deception, murder, stealing, adultery, violence. You know, I think of my country, the United States. I haven't been in these all my life, so I don't know. I have noticed a change in Sabite since the first time I came till now. It's changed quite a bit. But in my country, there were the 7 major disciplinary problems in the United States in the 1950s and then in the 1990s. That's the stats I have. I don't have the stats today, or I would be telling those. But from the 1950s to the 1990s, the problems they have. Pretty much it's taken from in schools, right? Now in the 1950s, the number one problem was talking in class. In the 90s, it was drug abuse. Second was chewing gum. Oh, as a teacher, you go, what? You love to have those problems, wouldn't you? Number 2 in the 90s, alcohol abuse. Number 3, making noise. Remember those days? Remember? I mean, you know, did those things, you're in trouble, man. You get the principal's office. 3, 90s, pregnancy. Number 4, running in the halls. Number 4 in the 90s, suicide. Number 5, getting out of place in line. Number 5 in the 90s, rape. Number 6, wearing improper clothing. I mean, we had to dress, man. We had to tuck in, you know, and we had to wear wingtips and socks and, you know, collared shirt, earbud, you know. Wearing improper clothing. 6 in the 90s, assault and burglary. Number 7 in the 50s, not putting paper in the trash can. I got in trouble with that. Number 7 in the 90s, arson and bombings. That shows you a big slide from the 50s to the 90s in the United States of America. That was a huge difference in the problems. Huge. Huge. And in a little bit, I have things I think were key things that happened that caused that kind of slide, but we'll get to that now. So then in verse 3 of Hosea 4, it says, therefore the land mourns, and everyone who lives in it languishes, along with the beasts of the field and the birds of the sky, and also the fish of the sea disappear. You know, God has brought some pretty heavy-duty droughts on the land of Israel. And he does that. He causes droughts so that he gets their attention. He's warning them. This is what is going to happen. It's going to be worse. He's trying to get their attention. He told them in Deuteronomy, if they strayed from him, that he would do anything he could to get their attention. And drought is one of those things that he uses to get their attention. Because you have drought, all of a sudden you have no food, you have no money. I mean, you know, it's a lot of stuff happens. And he's been doing this through the years and these things, but you know what? They still haven't listened. Even when they're troubled times, they still didn't listen. They still stayed away from him. And so in verse 4 he says, yet let no one find fault, and let none offer reproof, for your people are like those who contend with the priest. You see, when he says, let no one find fault, it's everybody thinks they're fine. Nobody's done anything wrong. Hey, we're good people. Look at you know, there's nothing wrong with us. We're doing fine. Don't tell us this is the judgment of God. I wonder how many natural disasters God has allowed because of his judgment. You know, but if you say that, you know, I remember somebody when it was the Hurricane Katrina hit, you know, there's some people said, judgment of God, man, people were concerned. What do you mean the judgment of God? Why would God, you know, we're okay. Why would God judge us? You know, that kind of thing. I see a lot. But there are consequences to sin. And there are judgments. And God does allow droughts. And he allows things to happen to get people's tension. And it says here, they will even argue with the priest. Instead of listening, maybe getting some counsel, they just argue with the priest. Well, and in verse 5, so you will stumble by that day, and the prophet also will stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother. See, they're just tripping around, stumbling. Even the prophets, their religious leaders, are stumbling with them. They're all stumbling each other, causing each other to sin. And when they do that, they're not blessed. When they could be blessed. Because God wants to bless them. They would just turn to Him. And then God wants to bless us. You know, in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, some of our favorite verses, you know, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. And do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. If you trust in the Lord, if you acknowledge Him in all your ways, He'll make your path straight. That means when you're straying, He'll bring you back around. You'll be faithful. As you're seeking Him out, He'll make your path straight. He'll keep you on the path. That's His promise to you. In Psalm 37:23, He says, the steps of a man are established by the Lord, and He delights in His way. You know, I like that. You know, when you're a righteous man, when you're a righteous woman, when you're saved, when you're walking with the Lord, He'll lead you, He'll guide you, He'll keep you on the path, He'll take care of you. He'll establish that path for you, so you can just walk it. Now, when He's talking about that, He's talking about a righteous man. And that's someone who is saved. A righteous person is one who has Jesus in their heart. He makes us righteous. He gives us His righteousness. He saves us. And then He's talking about, and I will destroy your mother, talking about, you know, the generations will pass away. You know, you're going to pass away. Your mother's going to pass away. It's going to be over. Then in verse 6, He tells them, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. You know, He has promises for us, and this isn't one of them I like. But you know, if we want to stray, if people want to walk away from Him, He says, well, you know what? I'm going to forget you. I'm not going to remember you. If you don't want me, why should I remember you? You know, he told the people of Israel, you are my representatives in the world. You are to reveal who I am to the people of the world. And they have not been a good representative of me. So He says, I will reject you from that role. Because you rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being my priest. The priest is the one who would speak to God for the people and speak to the people for God. And He says, I'm going to reject you from that role as being that light in the world, as the one who is going to bring the good news of who I am. I will reject you from that role. You have no knowledge of me. You have no wisdom. And you don't even want it. So they're all messed up. That's one of the problems in the world today is, you know, people just don't want the Lord. People don't want Jesus. They don't want to know God. They just don't want Him. They have no knowledge of God, and they don't want any knowledge. I believe, because once you realize there is a God, and you acknowledge there's a God, then you're going to have to answer to Him. So if you don't think, you pretend like there isn't one, then you don't have to answer to Him. But you're going to anyway, whether you like it or not. You're going to answer to Him. Here's the knowledge they are rejecting. I love it. Proverbs chapter 1. Why don't you turn to Proverbs chapter 1. Hold your place here. We'll go back here. I love this proverb. Proverb 1, verses 1 through 7. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction is wise behavior. Righteousness justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. That's a great proverb right there. I mean, we should seek God out, seek for His wisdom, seek for His knowledge, seek to know who He is. You see, fools despise wisdom and instruction. Those who reject the Lord. God, the Lord calls them fools. When they don't want to know, when they don't want wisdom and instruction. It's talking about His wisdom and His instruction, not just going to school and learn that the earth is round and that Antarctica is in the south, you know? Right? It is in the south. But to know God's wisdom. How do you know God's wisdom? How do you learn it? Studying His Word. Study His Word. Know Him. Meditate on His Word. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. You see, as you get to know who He is, that fear, not talking about the fear of shaking and shaking and shaking, but that fear of reverence and awe of who He is. Sometimes if you really, sometimes you go, you know what, God, who are you? One thing I do when I think of that, I go stand outside at night where there's no lights and look at the stars. Whoa. You put every one of those stars there, you name those stars, and then in those stars, you have messages to us. I mean, who are you, God? Go look at the stars. Go stand and look out at the sea. Look at the trees. You know, there's a lot of people say, yeah, I see God in creation. Yeah, so do we. But we know who He is also. They see Him as creation. We know He is the creator of those things. When I do that, those things I think about, you know, that awesome reverence of the Lord just sometimes just overwhelms me. You know what? That's what I would do when I lived in the States in Lake Tahoe. Because, you know, we were up 6,500 feet up in the sky, you know, because we're in a mountain. We live in the mountains. And so you're closer to the stars. And they seem to be just a little bit brighter up there for some reason. Because, you know, I don't know why. And it was a nice place. And there was no, like here, there's no pollution. You know, you can't go do that in Los Angeles, California, or somewhere like that. There's smog. All you see is smoke in the air. You can barely ever see the stars unless there's some storms and rain. But man, in Tahoe or here, just incredible. And that awesome reverence of God, you are big, you're holy, you're righteous. And people reject that. And you know, in my country, once again, I'm using my country a lot because that's where I'm from, and that's where I've seen many changes. You can map it out in the United States. You can map out the immorality of our country that I just showed you from the 50s to the 90s, and you can map it out starting with in the 1960s. I've had people do graphs of these things immorality, morals, and everything, morality in the United States, you know, just kind of going down, and then all of a sudden come boom, you know, and then in 72 or 3, then boom, it dropped again. Two big things that happened in our country. And the first one was, in the 1960s, prayer was removed from our schools. You could no longer pray in school. I mean, how do you think God felt about that? People say, well, church is state. Hogwash. It's our kids, brainwashing them to know God. Now they're teaching them, you know, when they're little kids about being a homosexual. In kindergarten, first grade, second grade now. But separate church and state. Well, not with that stuff. I'm going to stick my kid there if I have one. You can graph the moral decline of our country from those states going down. You go on the internet and find stuff like that. And the Lord warns throughout His Word, reject me and I will reject you. And since that time, man, the Supreme Court who did that, I mean, Our country has been trying to get rid of God out of our country. The leaders of the country, judges, Supreme Court judges, trying to take God, remove God from the United States of America. Take it off the money. I mean, you could look at it. I understand that the old, I can't remember now, but the old quarter, I believe, had the face of the president facing "In God We Trust," and now in the quarter, his back's to it. That's just a little, you probably not notice that unless you thought about it as a Christian. But what does that mean? Just a little, might mean nothing, but it might mean a lot. So the Lord warns, unless you repent and turn to me, I will reject you. And the reason being is God is a perfect gentleman. He is not going to force himself on you. He's not going to make you follow him. He's not going to make you pray. He's not going to make you read his word. He's not going to make you give your life to him. He's a gentleman. It's our choice. And if we don't want him, then he goes, okay, well then, I'm not going to make you come. I'm not going to make you be a part. Because he's a gentleman. In James, he says this, draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. And he's always waiting. He's there all the time, waiting for us to turn to him. Always. Now, back to Hosea, chapter 4, verse 7. It says, the more they multiplied, the more they sinned against me. I will change their glory into shame. The more they multiply, the more, let me see, I looked up the word in the Greek, and the word was rob or rove or something like that. It says like that. The more they prospered, the more abundance they had, the further they strayed from the Lord. The more they got, the further they strayed from the Lord. They got busy in the world and they walked away from the Lord. I see that nowadays a lot. People get so busy they haven't got time for the Lord. They've got time to go to church, to go to Bible study. They haven't got time to do this or to get together with people. People are so busy. We went to the States. They're crazy busy. Just nuts. People are pretty busy here too. And then the end there says, I will change their glory into shame. Because you see, they started off with God's glory. They were God's people. And they knew the Lord. And he says, and now it's going to turn to shame. Well, verse 8 and 9. They feed on the sin of my people and direct their desire toward iniquity. And it will be like people, like priests, so I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. See, even the spiritual leaders were in sin with them. The people are just living it up. They're feeding on their sin. They're just, just living for sin. I remember when I was younger, that's what we did. We just lived for sin. When we didn't walk with the Lord, we were looking for the next party we could go to, or we could go do this, or we could do that. What girl could we get, or whatever it was. Get this, get that. We just lived for sin. Wow. Can't wait, man, until we get that Colt 45. And then you got here the spiritual leaders, like people, like priests. There was no one for them to look to for hope even, because the priests weren't even an example anymore. They were a part of it. I look at some denominations, and their leaders, their pastors, their priests they go out and get drunk all the time. What kind of an example is that to their people? If they do it, well, might as well do it too, right? You see, God is a loving God. And sin must be judged. It's going to be judged. And that's why he says there, and I will punish them for their ways and repay them for their deeds. Because God is a just God. He's a loving God that must be dealt with. And you know what? Praise God, that's why Jesus came. Because Jesus dealt with it on the cross. You understand that? Jesus dealt with it. This punishment that God is talking about right here, and repaying him for the deeds, Jesus dealt with it on the cross. For you and I. For those who give their life to him. It's paid for. It's dealt with. God is a just God, and sin must be dealt with. So he gave it to himself. And he poured it on himself. And he took our sin and paid the price. Because you read that, and you can say, oh, he's going to punish him. See, God's not so nice. He's going to repay him. He's going to punish them. And then you understand that he took the punishment for us. If we just believe in him. That's a gracious and a good God. But he's also a God, you know what? He knows everything. It's not like you can hide anything from him. It says in Galatians 6, 7, and 8, it says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. For the one who sows to his flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And he's talking to all of us. Because we can sow to the flesh or we can sow to the Spirit in our lives. It's our choice every day. You want to walk in the flesh or you walk in the Spirit. It's a choice for you. And if we're going to walk in the flesh, we're going to suffer the consequences of it. Yeah, God still loves us. He still forgives us. We're still going to heaven. But there could be some scars along the way if we're not careful. Now, the last verse we're going to look at tonight. These people that have walked away, the things that God's saying is going to happen to them. And he's warning them here. He's trying to get their attention. And then he tells them this. He says, they will eat, but not have enough. They will play the harlot, but not increase. Because they have stopped giving heed to the Lord. They have stopped listening to the Lord. So they're going to eat and not be satisfied. You see, when you are after the desires of the flesh, one thing about the flesh, it's never satisfied. It always wants more. Tonight I'm out eating, and I got some pizza, and I'm eating my pizza, and my wife doesn't finish her salad. She says, want this? I go, yeah, I'll put away the pizza, and I can eat the rest of it tomorrow. And I ate her salad, and I was satisfied, but, I still ate some more pizza. Because my flesh wanted more, because it tasted good. And sometimes, I notice that I eat just from taste. I don't need any more. It just tastes so good. I eat some more. That's why we get these. And these. So, I always want more. I always want more. That's just one example in food, but it happens in all kinds of pleasures in this life. It says there also in that verse, it says, and they will play the harlot but not increase. You see, in those days, it's a little different than today. In those days, children were an asset. Children didn't cost the money. Today, children cost you money. You just got to send them to school, and if you send them to college, and you got to pay this and everything. And they're not such an asset anymore, especially in the States. They cost a lot of money. But in those days, the more kids you had, the more you had to go out and work in your field, And they would bring you in and maybe equipment to make $25,000 a year. Each kid would do that, and you would increase from that. But if you're out playing around, you're not having kids, you're not going to have that increase. You're not going to have those children. So they would understand that because of their culture at the time. That's what it was like. The kids were an asset. All of that immorality is costing them. All that immorality that people do. They're not set free from it. They want to do more. They're caught up in sexual immorality and in that sin, and that they become a slave to it, and they want more, and they want more, and they want. That's what happens to people who are child perverts. They might start off just with maybe a little pornography, and before you know it, they're just doing weird things. It doesn't usually start off with just a weird thing. It starts off and builds up. It's like when I was a kid, they would always tell you, man, if you do this, you'll be doing heroin. And if you start smoking pot, you'll be doing heroin. And, oh, come on now. But I remember when I was a kid, I started drinking first. And the next thing you know, it was pot, The next thing you know, I'm doing drugs, and acid and speed and barbiturates. And, I was doing all these different, it did. I needed more, I needed more, I needed more. It was the same thing with people with sex, I tell kids when I was in the youth group, as a youth group leader, don't even hold hands. Because if you don't hold hands, you won't kiss. If you kiss, stop there. Because once you kiss one way, once the tongue goes in the mouth, you never go back to go. And then once you do something else, you don't go back. It just continually progresses. So don't even start. Don't even be girlfriend or boyfriend. Wait till you get married. It's the best. Of course, that's not our culture. That's not our society. But it's best. And these people, they stopped giving heed to the Lord. They stopped listening to the Lord. So because of that, they're not being blessed anymore. Their wealth is going to go down. Their health is going to go down. I mean, it's just their life, their families, everything's going to go down. It's going to be a mess. One of my favorite Psalms, and we're going to just look at this to end this study tonight, is Psalm 1. Proverbs 1 and Psalm 1. Go ahead and turn to Psalm 1. Because it talks about how to be blessed, how to be happy. And it's not what Israel is doing here in Hosea. Psalm 1, how blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree firmly planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff, which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. And so this psalm tells us how to be happy, how to be blessed. A person who is separated from the things of the world. A person who is watching their walk. They're not walking with the wicked. They're not hanging out with the wicked. Which, hanging out with them, you end up doing the things that they do. You're not taking counsel from the wicked. You're looking for godly counsel and God's wisdom. You want Jesus to give you good, godly counsel. And you don't stand with the sinners, because you stand with them, next thing you know, you'll be sitting with them, you'll be apart with them. But the person who is happy will seek the counsel of the Lord. And when they seek the counsel of the Lord, they're going to be like that tree that's by the waters. The trees that are really green. The perfect picture for us is because we lived in Lake Tahoe, and we spent a lot of time going down to Reno and outside of Reno, and Reno's a desert. But the Truckee River, comes out of where we lived in Truckee, and we have this river called the Truckee River. It comes out of the mountains, and it runs through Reno, and it goes out into the desert, into Pyramid Lake. And if you from a distance, if you look at it, everything by the river is green within so many feet, and then it's desert. It's because the roots are solid. They're getting water. They're getting that fresh water. And that's what we will be like if we seek God's counsel and His wisdom. How do you get that? From His Word, from godly people. Because water in the Word represents the Word. The water of the Word, just like the water. Water in those roots, firmly planted. And here's the difference. The person who is ungodly, as it says here, is wicked. They're going to be just the leftover stuff. They're going to be blown away like the chaff from the wheat. When it goes in the air, the wheat falls down, it's heavy, the chaff is blown away. They won't be there. They're not going to be there with us in eternity. They're going to be gone. See, we are righteous because of Jesus. And we never want to stop listening to him. But the world doesn't listen. They don't take heed to the Lord. Just like Israel didn't take heed to the Lord. And what happens? Problems develop. Families fall apart. Violence goes rampant. We see that in the world today. It's absolutely nuts. Health issues arise. Discontentment with people. Discontentment in the people with everything. Mental problems, mental stress from not knowing Jesus. Did you know the United States of America has the most suicides than any country in the world? The result of walking away from God, from not taking heed to the Lord. And so God here, he says, trust me. Because God has peace and joy for Israel. He has peace and joy for his people. He has peace and joy for us. Trust me. Believe in him. And he's giving Israel a warning here. And also anybody who reads this. Depending on where you're at with the Lord. It could be a warning to you. It might just be a reminder. It might be just remind you to pray for the world, for the people in the world. Because in 2 Chronicles 7:11, God says this. He says, and my people, who are called by my name, humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways. And I will hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. That's a promise from God to Israel. And I feel that is a promise from God to you and beliefs, for those in the United States, that his people, we, that's us, we, if we, who are called by his name, if we humble ourselves and pray and seek his face and turn away from our wicked ways, here's his promise. He will hear from heaven and forgive our sin and heal our lands. And I know I've shared this with you before, and I share it again with you tonight. When God says that, I look at that and say, you know what? It begins in the house of the Lord. Because many Christians, we compromise our walks. And if we would really humble ourselves, if we would really pray, we would really turn from those wicked things and wicked ways. And the people of God did that. He would heal believers. He would heal the United States of America. But you know what? We're not doing it. Obviously. Or we'd be getting healed. Yeah, I mean, that's what I see. You know, I'm not trying to make a judgment. I'm not trying to condemn you. I'm just speaking, wow, Lord. I'm speaking to myself, too, right? Okay? To all of us. So, Lord, we come before you tonight, Lord. And I ask, Father, that you would seek each one of our hearts, Lord, that we would humble ourselves before you because you are God and you are holy and you died on the cross for our sin, Lord. And we want to pray for our nations, Lord. We want to pray for the people in our village here on this peninsula. Lord, we want to pray that they would get saved, that they would know you. And Lord, if that takes us crucifying the flesh, Lord, so that the people can know you, then do it, Lord. Reveal to us what we need to deal with in our lives, Father, that we can be made right before you, where we can see these things happen, Father. Because, Lord, we love our countries. Lord, we love the people. And we know you love them more. So give us the heart, Lord. Make us more like you. And, Lord, let us not be like Israel that we see here in Hosea, Lord, and to stop listening to you, but to seek you, your wisdom out, that we would have your wisdom, that we would have knowledge of you, Lord, because we read your word, we study your word, Lord, we fellowship together, we pray together, Lord, and we just love you together, Lord. So, Lord, here we are in this room tonight, Lord. Start in this room. Make things right. Forgive us and use us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, you guys. God bless you. Have a good week in the Lord.